Welcome to another edition of the CS Podcast Bears postgame show, brought to you guys by the NUC NFL Draft Bible, bringing you the names that you need to know first since 2002. Visit NFLDraftBible.com, and as always, joining me here on the Bears postgame show is Aaron Leming from Bear Report, BearReport.com, and you could give him a follow on Twitter at Aaron Leming. And Aaron, it was another tough game to watch as the Bears fall to the Washington Redskins 24-21. An ugly first half, which ended actually in the Bears' favor with a Jay Cutler to Alshon Jeffrey touchdown with under a minute to go. But other than that, it was a very ugly half for the Chicago Bears. And then, towards the end of the game, it was a much better second half, to say the least. But towards the end of the game, they were in a position where they did not want to be in, and that was, putting themselves in a position where they would let Robbie Gould force the game into overtime. They really put the game into his foot, I guess you could say, for a second straight week in a row. And once again, Robbie Gould misses a crucial field goal, and the Chicago Bears drop this one 24-21. They're now 5-8 on the season. The Skins move to 6-7. I mean, end to their playoff hopes after this loss?
Yeah, this one, the Bears are they're not quite mathematically eliminated, but they're right there. It's unfortunate because, ultimately they could have won these last two games and been right in the midst of it. But, when you look at it realistically, they're just not a very good team, and that's really all there is to it. They've seen, at least in my opinion, somewhat of they've really just kind of gone downhill the last few weeks. And, you see what the 49ers did this week versus last week. Bears got beat by a pretty poor team last week, and although Washington has been pretty up and down all year, that was their first road win all year. And, the Bears are just making the same mistakes over and over. And I think, obviously, a lot of it has to do with the injuries. You've had injuries all over. Defensive side of the ball, it was big this week. Pernell McPhee was gone. Bryce Callahan was gone. Antrell Roll was gone. That's three starters right there. In their place, obviously, Willie Young's been playing good. Lamar Houston's been good. But it's always good to have the presence with Pernell McPhee. He's a playmaker when healthy. He really hasn't been healthy much lately, which was a concern even as a free agent, something a lot of people don't realize. He's had the issues for a while. But, you look at Antrell Roll, he's been gone most of the year. He's been okay at best. We're starting to see Adrian Amos get exposed a little bit lately, which is fine. He's a rookie. He's going to have growing pains. That's not a big deal. But I think the biggest issue right now is, their inside linebackers are awful. Shane McClellan, I thought, started off somewhat shaky and started really coming on before his injury. And, that one good game when he came back off the injury, but since then, he's been bad. Jonathan Anderson's been okay, I guess, and Christian Jones has been awful. It really comes down to the fact that I don't think they have one starting linebacker on the team right now. And it's very frustrating, especially watching against Washington and seeing how well Mason Foster's looked for them. I find it very hard to believe. There's nobody that can convince me that he wasn't their best linebacker going into training camp. And, there's no way that he shouldn't have made the team. So, overall, it was a sloppy game. But at the same time, as we keep going back to every week, this is the team that was a projected win team by USA Today. And outside of the Arizona game, outside of the Seattle game, without Cutler there, they've been in every single game. And they're playing about how their talent level is now. They're playing over their head for a while. They've had some big wins. They've had some stuff that they can build off of, and that's just the way. At some point, they'll get over the top, but I think a lot of that's going to be next year, and they're just going to have to get more talent on the field. They're going to have plenty of money. They're going to have plenty of draft picks. The more they lose, it's tough to watch, but at the same time, the more they lose, the better draft position they get. And the higher draft position at this point, the better for them, especially the inside linebacker, pass rusher, defensive line. Anything you look at, obviously having the highest draft pick is going to be the best bet at this point. So, there's definitely some negatives in there. They're not playing good football, but at the same time, it's getting towards the end of the year. You're seeing a lot of injuries. And overall, I think they've really exceeded expectations. I still think they can win another game or two this year. Minnesota will be a fun game, and like I said, they're hanging in every game. That's about all you can ask for, especially in somewhat of a rebuild season like most people have projected.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if this team would have been in the game, down the stretch if, we had the same coaching staff as the team had last year under Mark Trestman. They kept fighting, which is something you've seen pretty much every single game this season. I mean, they're gonna fight until the end. They're not gonna just call it quits, heading into the second half or anything like that. But something that you said, I mean, it is very frustrating to see a guy like Mason Foster, who I even thought was, almost a lock to make the team. I mean, I remember when he first signed with the team during free agency, the free agency period. I thought it was a very solid signing. I thought he had a lot of success in Tampa Bay. Was a very solid player in Tampa Bay, and I thought we were getting a pretty good linebacker there. And now to see him on the other side, on the other team, kind of having a little bit of success with Washington, and seeing the guys in a Bears uniform like McClellan, like Christian Jones, struggling, especially the way that they struggled today. Very frustrating to say the least. And I guess I just want to talk a little bit about Lamar Houston and Willie Young. I thought both had a very solid game. I see they both, according to NFL.com, had both one sack. I mean, it seemed like they were making a whole lot more noise in the backfield than just one sack each. But especially Willie Young, over these last few weeks, he's really seemed to come into that outside linebacker position, and it seems like he's playing more comfortable and learning the position even more. And I know he got the start for Pernell McPhee today. What are your thoughts on how both Lamar Houston and Willie Young, how they've been able to kind of gel together now over these last few weeks, 4 or 5 games? And is there a possibility that, and I know it's still way too early to tell, and it's probably not a good look that I'm already looking forward to next season, but is there a possibility that Willie Young is still on this team next season, and maybe they don't decide to trade him, because I can't see them cutting this guy?
Well, I mean, right now they've both come on really well, and it's something, especially with ACL. Obviously that's kind of a buzzword within the NFL community, especially with injuries. I mean, and they've always said it takes a year to come back, and although these guys are getting out on the field and playing, it's been very evident that it took them a little bit to get in, and especially Willie Young. I mean, he's been a guy that, Achilles is usually a worse injury than ACL, and a lot of people don't know that. But I think it's very evident at this point that both of these guys have really bounced back. They look completely healthy. They're getting more playing time, and I think that's a big thing. I think, Lamar Houston's obviously, he's making a little bit over twice as much as Willie Young is at this point. But, right now, they have so many holes within this defense that I don't think you can cut or trade either one of these guys at this point going into next year. And I think the big thing is, obviously, Willie Young and Houston have both said, they are defensive ends. But at the same time, I mean, this is the fourth or fifth game in a row where Willie Young's had a sack. I mean, that's big. Lamar Houston hadn't had anything before the San Diego game, and all of a sudden he's piling them up too. Willie Young's been all over the place, and that's been very surprising. And Lamar Houston's been playing well. I mean, he had nine total tackles. He had a sack, 2 tackles for losses, and he had a QB hit. So, I mean, ultimately, these guys are really coming on. A lot of this has been without Pernell McPhee, and even when McPhee's been on the field, it's obvious he hasn't been healthy. So I think it's going to alleviate a lot of, the pressure, especially from an outside linebacker's perspective. I do think they need to, either add somebody, in the draft, or sign somebody, maybe, not quite as high of a level as, some people are thinking. But I think, they can definitely build around what they have. I mean, these injuries definitely got to be a little bit of a concern. Like I said before, his knees, this isn't a new thing for him. And this is something that obviously really haven't seen much of, because it was his first year on the Bears, and he was a part-time player in Baltimore. But it's something that it's worth a concern later on in life, later on in his career. So it should be interesting. But overall, I think the development of the pass rushers is going to be big, especially at the outside linebacker position. I think they're still struggling to contain the run a little bit, and I think that'll be helped. I think, honestly, defensive line is more of a need at this point. Jarvis Jenkins is still been playing pretty good, and I think he could be starting quality. But I think the Bears are probably going to take more of a rotation approach in the future. And Will Sutton's been okay, and Nico Ferguson was okay before he went on IR. But at this point, I mean, they really don't have that third starter, and they really don't have that solid line. So, I mean, I would say, during free agency and during the draft. I think that's going to be a point that they hit on. But, I mean, overall, the defense has developed pretty well. Obviously, they haven't been quite as good lately. Inconsistencies, but at the same time, I mean, they just can't keep healthy on either side of the ball, and I think that's a big thing right now. So it'll be interesting to see moving forward, but I do think they're still in a pretty good position. I definitely think the development of both Houston and Willie Young is going to be big for them moving forward. I don't think they can really let either one of those guys go. Willie Young's going to be making just a little over $3 million next year in the final year of his contract. He's over the age of 30, but at the same time, I mean, he really doesn't have that many miles. So, at very worst, I think as long as he's playing, as long as he's producing, I think he'll be happy, and I think they'll be able to get away with at least having another year to be able to bridge the gap if they want to draft somebody in, the mid rounds or even, second or third round and be able to develop him. So I think they're in pretty good shape in terms of outside linebacker at this point.
You touched on that defensive line, and one guy I kind of want to point out is Mitch Unrein. Now, I know we just brought him in here on a one-year deal. I thought he made his presence felt pretty early with that sack. I believe somewhere in that, I believe it was the first drive of the game, Mitch Unrein had that sack. Is this a guy that we could possibly see stick around as well, or is this a guy that, we still got to see him make an impact in these last 3 or 4 games?
I definitely think he's a guy that's, he very well could get a contract going in next year. I mean, there's definitely familiarity with Fox, so that's definitely a big thing. And I mean, he's been very versatile. He got his first sack today in his career. I mean, that's obviously good. And he's still relatively young. I think he's a guy that can be pretty nice on a rotation. I mean, he can really play any spot on the line, which is a plus. I think biggest thing with the defensive line right now is they're going to have some decisions to make. And once again, it kind of goes back to cleaning up Phil Emery's mess. I think Will Sutton has been, somewhat consistent. He's been playing okay, although he definitely hasn't been the same player since he had that, the injury that he went out with. And, right now I don't know how to feel about Ego Ferguson. I think he's a guy that definitely has some value. I mean, I think both guys have value within a rotation. I think Jarvis Jenkins does as well. And I think Jarvis Jenkins is a guy that they do need to re-sign. But right now, I mean, they need more impact on that line, and I really think they need somewhat of a pass rusher, from the defensive end spot. I think Eddie Goldman's developing very well. Obviously, he's still a rookie. He's going to have those growing pains, just like Adrian Amos has, just like really any of the rookies have, even with Langford with his drops. But, I mean, this is a very good, solid core and something that's not really being, thought about too much. It's more of, thinking about it now instead of thinking about the future is the fact that, their first round pick, Kevin White, hasn't played yet. So really their Ryan Pace's first year has been great, especially for the development on the defensive side of the ball. But when you look at defensive line, and especially inside linebacker, I mean, there's going to be some good options out there. Garrett Wolf is a name I've been told to look out for. Obviously both inside linebackers for the Broncos could be good targets. And at this point, I'm not sure that they can justify, in my personal opinion, re-signing Shane McClellan at this point to be a starter. I don't think he has it in him at this point. And maybe with a better guy next to him at the jack position, that could be an option. But I think they need to go out, and I think they need to get 2 new linebackers, and even if one of them has starting upside and have them compete with McClellan, but they definitely need a better jack right now. And look at defensive line, and I mean, there's definitely some good depth in the draft, and there's some good depth in free agency. They don't need to go out. I mean, as nice as it would be to see them sign a marquee name like Muhammad Wilkerson, I mean, that's probably not going to be too likely just because he's going to be a high-paid guy that's going to be, $16, $17, $18 million a year. Malik Jackson from Denver's out there. Obviously, Derek Wolf's out there, and he's so young. He's going to be 26 at the beginning of next year. He's a guy that has some upside. He's a guy that was suspended, but he came back and he's been playing well. He's been flying a little bit under the radar, and he is a John Fox guy. So I definitely think they have some options to get better at every position. Obviously, corner's another position, but defensive line is definitely going to be a curious one moving forward. I mean, they have somewhat of a logjam. I do think they have some value with some of these guys, but ultimately, I think they're going to end up having to choose between Ferguson and Sutton. And right now, I mean, I don't know who they would take as a rotational guy, but they can't have both these guys starting on the same line if they want to have a good defense.
Again, he's Aaron Leming from Bear Report, bearreport.com. You guys can give him a follow on Twitter at Aaron Leming NFL. And, switching gears to the offensive side of the ball, Aaron, I see Jay Cutler completed 19 of his 31 total passes, 315 yards, 2 touchdowns. And you look at his targets, Alshon Jeffrey, 6 receptions, 107 yards, 1 score. Zach Miller, 5 receptions, 85 yards, 1 score. And then after that, you got Mark Mariani for 2 receptions, Deontay Thompson, a reception, which went for 36 yards. Langford, Eddie Royal was back today. He had 1 reception, which was that screenplay, which he took 15 yards. Looking at Zach Miller, obviously another big game for Zach Miller, a guy that is really making the most of his opportunity, and he'll be able to for the rest of the season, seeing as Martellus Bennett is now placed on a season-ending IR with the rib injury. Is Zach Miller a guy that could possibly be this team's starting tight end next season? So far since he's finally healthy. Since he's been able to get the opportunity to kind of be on the field more, he's certainly had a nice impact. It seems like him and Jay Cutler have a nice thing brewing, nice chemistry for sure. I guess if you were a betting man, has Martellus Bennett played in his final game as a Chicago Bear?
I think Martellus Bennett's 100% gone. Personally, I don't think I don't think him being put on IR was more. I think it was more of a personal decision than it was injury related at this point. And I'm definitely not the only one, who gets that feeling. So, I think Bennett was a little bit loud during the beginning of the year about his contract status, and then obviously, it's been an ongoing thing with him all year. He just doesn't really seem to engage. They talked about having cracked ribs, and I don't doubt that, but at the same time, he just hasn't been playing the same all year. So, yeah, I think Zach Miller's definitely earned the right to stick around, and I think he'll be loyal to the team. I got a chance to talk to him during training camp. This is a guy that, went out. He's had awful injury history, and luck all throughout his career, and this is a guy that's finally healthy and finally playing a full season. And this is a guy who went down, had a great week 1 in preseason, and really caught the attention of a lot of Bears fans and the organization in general. And this is a guy that went out on IR for the year and really wasn't even technically, really a part of the team. He was a guy that, I guess he was on the IR, so technically the guy's still getting paid, but at the same time, this is a guy that stuck around all year, that was in the locker room. He was consistently learning. He was consistently being there. He's a very confident guy. And, a whole entire new regime comes in and they still re-sign him. I think that says a lot for a guy. He doesn't have the biggest attributes. He's not a huge guy like Martellus Bennett. He is definitely big, but he doesn't quite have that flashiness. At the same time, he's done very nice things in the Bears uniform. He's been very reliable in the red zone, and although I don't think he can be 100% the starter moving forward, I do think if they do release Martellus Bennett, I think they can go after a guy like Dwayne Allen, or somebody along the lines of that. One of the kind of the mid-level free agents that get him for $3 or $4 million a year, and that's the big thing going forward, is the fact that, the Bears are going to be running the ball a lot more. So there's not going to be quite as many balls being thrown, and that's something that we've seen this year. And regardless of if that is, if that's Adam Gase, if he leaves for a head coaching job and, Logan steps in or somebody along the lines like that does, I think the Bears are still going to be committed to the run. And I think that's going to be something that we're going to see just because it is a John Fox team. So with that being said, they're not going to be throwing the ball nearly as much as they did with Mark Trestman of the helm. So you don't need, 3 top flight targets like they had with Martellus Bennett and obviously Brandon Marshall and Alshon Jeffrey. I ultimately think at very worst they'll at least tag Alshon Jeffrey this next year, see how he does with somebody else next to him. But ultimately I think they'll end up getting a deal done with him, whether it be this coming off season or I don't know when it'll be, but I think they'll end up getting something done. But they're going to have Kevin White. They're going to have Marquise Wilson. They're going to have Eddie Royal. They've got some weapons. They may go out and draft somebody. So, at this point, I don't think having that top flight tight end is really as big of a need. I definitely think somebody in the slot with some speed would be nice. I don't really know how to feel about Eddie Royal at this point in time. He really just, even when he's been healthy, and he really hasn't been doing much. But I definitely think that Zach Miller can be a guy moving forward in the future. I mean, yeah, he already is over 30, but at the same time, he doesn't really have that much mileage. He could be a guy that could be a good 3 or 4 or 5 year type guy, sign him to a 2 or 3 year deal and see what he can do. He won't be a high cost guy. I mean, you could basically get probably him and a guy like I said, Dwayne Allen, or maybe Ladarius Green, or somebody along the lines of that. One of the guys that really hasn't come out yet that could be a number one tight end. And get those guys for probably about the same price as Martellus Bennett. And that's something that you can save money and you can see what else you got. So it should be interesting, but I definitely think moving forward, I do think Martellus Bennett has played his last game as a Bear.
And again, Zach Miller scored his 5th touchdown of the season today in the Bears' 24-21 loss against the Washington Redskins. And I guess sticking with the receiving corps, Aaron, it's been a weekly thing now. I mean, any update on Kevin White? I know there was some reports earlier in the week. The Chicago Tribune, I think it was, reported that the Bears will shut him down. Now, they do have until Tuesday to make the final decision whether or not to bring him up to the 53-man roster. And again, even if they do decide to bring him up to the 53-man roster, there's no guarantee that he will play a game. I believe there's only 46 guys that dress every week, so there is a possibility that even if he is elevated, there's a possibility that he won't even play. But any developments in the Kevin White saga?
Well, it's been interesting because I got word early in the week that there was a chance that he could play this weekend, and it's been my source has been pretty consistent all year saying that he's going to play. That's basically what I've been saying, and I kind of pass that along. And next thing I know, Tribune has a article coming out about 2 or 3 hours later saying that he's shut down for the year, and it's been a little confusing. It's been a very interesting situation to say the least. I get 2 different people confirming that he had a chance to play this week and that he wasn't going to play this year. Have the Tribune guys saying something completely different, and then Adam Johns and Adam Hogue come out and say that they haven't made a decision, and then follow that by John Fox saying that there's a difference between facts and what's being reported, saying that they haven't. So obviously, yeah, they have to make a decision on Tuesday. I really don't know what to think right now. Like I said, my source has been pretty consistent all year saying that he is going to play. This is also, most of the reports coming out were also saying that, that White wouldn't even have that 21-day window with the team to be able to practice. So at this point, I mean, it's really somewhat up in the air, but I'm going to go ahead and stick to my guns and say that I still expect him to play. Now, if they put him on IR, maybe due to this loss, I don't know. I don't think that has anything to do with it, at least from what I've been told. But if they put him on IR at this point in time, I mean, it is what it is. But if they can, get him in for these last 3 games, I think it would be very beneficial, especially moving forward to next year. Because really, this offense hasn't had much tempo. So we'll have to see, but like I said, I'll go ahead and stick with my guns. I mean, we'll know for sure on Tuesday, but I'm going to go ahead and stick and say that I think he still plays this year.
And you know what? If he's 100%, I think it'll benefit both him and the team if he's out there. And as you said a few times, Aaron, I mean, even if he does play, I mean, don't expect him to play every offensive snap. I mean, expect 10, 15 snaps. This is a guy that's going to get his first NFL experience, and I think, like you said, it'll benefit him greatly if he's able to go out there. And of course, that's if he's 100%. Again, the Bears fell to the Redskins 24-21. The Bears are now 5-8 on the season. The Skins moved to 6-7. And I guess looking at next week, Aaron, I mean, this is a game that I'm sure most Bears fans, like last week, want to just erase from their memory. But looking at next week, it's against a fellow NFC North team in the Minnesota Vikings, a team that the Bears probably should have beaten earlier on in the season. What are your keys to a Bears victory for next week?
Well, I think it's really getting off to a good start. I mean, they've got off to very poor starts the last few weeks, and I think a lot of it has to do with the play calling, especially offensively. I don't really understand why Gase continues to put them in second and third and long situations. I mean, obviously some of that has to do with the fact that they're making stupid mistakes, whether it be holding calls or whatever it may be, but I mean, these very predictable first and second down calls, especially with the run, are really setting them up for, second, third longs. And I think that's been a big issue for them all year. There's really been no tempo for the team, and that's something. I mean, obviously there's been injuries. Cutler got sacked 3 times today. The offensive line looked pretty bad overall. I don't think there's really one player that you can point to say had a good game. But I think a lot of it just has to do with finding that tempo, and I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that they've got to make the right play calls, and these consistent first and second down runs that are going for 1 or 2 yards, or going for no gain or losing yards. I mean, that's got to end. They've got to be able to mix things up. Cutler had another very good game today. I mean, obviously he struggled a little bit last week. But he had a very good game today, and they're really struggling to stretch the field right now. And I think a lot of it has to do with pace. I think getting things up and going, getting a higher tempo, getting things more consistent overall, I think is really going to open up things downfield. So we'll have to see. And then on the defensive side of the ball, I think the biggest thing is, they've got to tighten up their coverage right now. They're getting decent amount of pressure on the quarterback, but when it's not getting a decent amount of pressure on the quarterback, for the most part, it's coming down to them not being able to make the play in coverage. I mean, they had multiple chances today. I mean, one that I guess you call it the little air ball that was thrown up in the air. Alan Ball had a chance at it. Sherrick McManus had a chance at it. And somehow Matt Jones came down with the ball. I mean, those are the kind of plays that you have to make. And I saw a lot of 5 and 10 yard cushion out there today, and it didn't really make much sense to me. Tracy Porter's struggled the last 2 games. I mean, obviously Kyle Fuller made a play, but I don't think really anybody looked good. I think getting Bryce Callahan would be big, and I think another thing is just going to be continue to be much better on special teams. That's something that they have done over the last few weeks, and I think Deontay Thompson's been a big ass to them. And I mean, it's been a little interesting this year, obviously, because they really haven't had the cold weather. But as the weather starts getting colder, I mean, there's only 3 games left this year. But as the weather starts getting colder, field position starts becoming a bigger thing, and a lot of it has to do with special teams. A lot of the touchbacks aren't going to start going out. So I think Deontay Thompson's going to have a chance to show. They've just been playing overall much better on special teams. So, I mean, overall, it's going to be another game where it's going to be a toss-up. They're probably either going to win or lose it in the last few minutes of the game, like they have basically all game this year. And, I mean, overall, it's just going to be really being, I think, consistent on offense is going to be their biggest thing, and not putting themselves in those situations. But who really knows at this point? They seem to find either a new way to win every week or a new way to lose every week. So it's really tough to tell.
And you know what? I don't think this team had, or at least this season, they haven't had any home field advantage. It certainly seems that way. So maybe playing on the road in Minnesota will be a good thing for this team, and hopefully they get their 6th victory of the season next week at Minnesota after they drop this one 24-21 against the Washington Redskins. Aaron, as always, man, I mean, your insight and your time is always greatly appreciated, and hopefully, like I said, I mean, hopefully we could be talking about a Bears victory next weekend after this Vikings game.
Absolutely. Hopefully they can finish out strong. But worst case, I mean, at least they're improving their the draft status at this point.
Yeah, you're absolutely right about that. Thanks, Aaron.
No problem. Have a good day.